Ethan Reynolds had always taken pride in running Apex Airways with a visionary mindset and an unwavering commitment to excellence. From his penthouse office in Manhattan, he received glowing reports from his executives. Profit margins were up, passenger numbers were steady, and customer satisfaction scores remained high. His airline was an industry leader, a symbol of reliability. So why the hell was social media flooded with complaints? Why were passengers describing Apex Airways as a nightmare of delays, indifferent service, and exhausted crews? Ethan frowned as he scrolled through the online posts. More importantly, why was he hearing whispers, anonymous reports from insiders, about overworked employees, unsafe schedules, and plummeting morale? Something was wrong. He wasn't going to get the truth from polished reports or scripted boardroom presentations. For the first time in over a decade, Ethan Reynolds was about to set foot on one of his own planes. Not as a CEO, but as David Miller, an unremarkable businessman in cheap jeans, a hoodie, and a fake beard. LAX Terminal, a rude awakening. The Apex Airways first-class lounge at Los Angeles International Airport was not what Ethan had expected. The leather seats were worn, the self-service coffee machine was out of order, and the attendant behind the desk looked like they were one rude customer away from walking out mid-shift. He approached the counter, expecting the kind of elite VIP treatment he envisioned for his airline's most valued customers. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "I was wondering if there's an update on the flight to Chicago." The woman behind the counter barely glanced at him. "Delayed. Another 45 minutes. Ethan frowned. "Is there a specific reason? Weather? Equipment?" Her tone was flat, disinterested. "Not really sure." "Not really sure?" Ethan bit his tongue. If he were here as CEO, she'd be fired on the spot. Instead, he nodded. "All right, thanks." She had already turned away. What the hell is happening to my airline? Boarding, reality hits. When they finally called for first-class boarding, Ethan felt a flicker of relief. It lasted exactly 10 seconds. The jet bridge was crowded with economy passengers despite priority boarding. People shoved, sighed, and blocked the way. An older woman with a cane struggled while a young man in an Apex Airways uniform, one of his employees, just stood there, scrolling on his phone. Ethan clenched his jaw. This is unacceptable. Finally stepping into the aircraft, he expected at least some warmth from the flight crew. Instead, he was met with tired eyes and forced smiles. "Welcome aboard," a flight attendant muttered, barely looking at him. Ethan glanced at her name tag. Lisa Carter. No relation, obviously. Before he could respond, she turned away. Making his way to seat 2A, Ethan barely had time to settle in before noticing another problem. First class was filthy. Crumbs littered the seat beside him. A used napkin was still stuffed in the tray table. The window was smudged with fingerprints. He exhaled slowly. If this is first class, what the hell is economy like? Across the aisle, a man pressed the call button repeatedly. A minute passed, then 2. No response. Finally, Lisa returned, but instead of assisting, she simply leaned over and turned off the button without even looking at him. Ethan watched in stunned silence. Has customer service really fallen this far? Overhearing the truth. By the time the flight took off, Ethan's frustration had settled into something heavier, disbelief. But nothing prepared him for what happened next. Seated just behind him, Lisa and another flight attendant, Sarah Mitchell, were speaking in low, exhausted voices. Ethan wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but then he heard his own name, and he froze. Sarah scoffed. "The CEO of this airline? Please. The man sits in his damn glass tower, collecting profits while we break our backs." Lisa chuckled. "You think he even knows what we go through? He doesn't give a—" Ethan felt his stomach turn. Sarah leaned in. "Did you hear about Emily Reyes?" Lisa sighed. "God, yeah. I still can't believe it." Ethan's grip tightened on the armrest. Sarah lowered her voice. "They're covering it up. Do you know how many double shifts she worked that week? She was exhausted, Lisa. And when she collapsed, do you think they cared? No. They hushed it up, just like they always do." Ethan's breath caught. Who the hell was Emily? And what the hell were they talking about? Lisa shook her head. "And you know what's sick? Nothing will change. Because as long as the money keeps rolling in, they don't care. Sarah scoffed. I'd love to see that CEO step onto one of these flights. Just once. See how much he loves his airline then. Lisa laughed. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the chest. They hated him. Not the CEO. Not the leader. Him. And somebody had died. A cover-up. His mouth went dry. He wanted to turn around and demand answers. But he knew that wasn't the way. Not yet. Instead, he sat there, heart pounding, ears burning, listening as his employees ripped him apart. He had come here looking for answers. He had found them. And now, everything was about to change. The moment of truth. The plane touched down at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. But Ethan Reynolds barely noticed. His own employees had just exposed something catastrophic. A cover-up. A death. Exhaustion so severe that it killed one of their own. And he had no idea. For years, he had trusted his executives to handle operations, to take care of his people. Now, sitting in a stained first-class seat, he realized the truth. They had failed him. Or worse, he had failed them. As the flight taxied to the gate, he forced himself to remain calm. There was no point in acting yet. Not until he had more information. But once that seatbelt sign flipped off, he was done playing along. Ethan peeled off his fake beard and tucked his glasses into his pocket. Then, turning to face Lisa Carter and Sarah Mitchell, who were gathering their things near the galley, he spoke. Lisa. Sarah. They froze. Lisa blinked, confused. Do I know you? Ethan held their gaze. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his real ID. The one with his actual name. He didn't need to say anything. The second Lisa read it, her face drained of color. Sarah clapped a hand over her mouth. Passengers were still disembarking, but the energy in first class had shifted. A suffocating silence. Lisa stammered. And Mr. Reynolds, His voice was sharp, cutting. Don't apologize. I want you to tell me everything. Right now.